I was in a coma for 6 weeks after a brutal accident. They said I couldn't hear or feel a thing, but I did. I heard her voice. I saw him with her. I watched my wife fall in love with another man, right beside my hospital bed. And when I woke up, I remembered everything. To my loyal viewers and subscribers, thank you for always showing up. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss another heart-wrenching, real-life story. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel to help bring more dramatic, emotional, and inspiring stories to life. Now let's get into it. My name is Jack Whitman. I'm 40 years old, born and raised in a quiet part of Colorado. I'm a structural engineer by trade, the kind of guy who spends more time working with blueprints than people. I like things solid, straight, dependable. That's how I built my life. That's how I thought my marriage was too. I met Claire in college. She was this smart, quick-witted woman studying healthcare administration, with eyes that could pin you down and a voice that always felt like home. We got married a few years after graduation. Bought a house in Evergreen. Nothing fancy, just enough yard for her garden and a little patio where we'd have coffee on Sunday mornings. We were married for 12 years. And I loved her every single day. It happened on a Monday. I was driving home from Denver after a job inspection. The last thing I remember is seeing brake lights, and then nothing. They said a teenager, drunk and texting, blew through a red light and slammed into the side of my truck. It flipped. I was trapped for over an hour before paramedics got me out. By the time I reached the hospital, I was unconscious. Swelling on the brain, internal bleeding, broken ribs. They placed me in a medically induced coma. They told Claire I might never wake up. But I did. Only while my body slept, my mind didn't. They say coma patients don't remember anything, that the brain is too damaged to shut down. That wasn't true for me. It wasn't like dreaming. It was more like floating in a dark room where voices passed through like smoke. Sometimes I'd hear doctors, nurses, machines, beeping, talking. But most of the time, I heard her. Claire. Her voice came often in the first week. She read books, played songs, held my hand. She cried when she thought I couldn't hear her. "I need you to come back to me, Jack," she whispered once, her voice cracking. "Please, I don't know how to do this without you." I tried to reach her. God knows I did. But I was stuck, screaming inside a body that wouldn't move. I think I was holding on to her voice like a lifeline. But then it changed. I noticed the difference slowly. Her words grew more distracted. Her visits shorter. She started sighing more. And then, one day, I heard a voice I didn't recognize. A man's voice. He called her Claire Bear. She laughed. Not the kind of laugh you give to a friend. No, this one had softness to it. Warmth. I felt it like a knife sliding between my ribs. "Marcus," she said. I'll never forget the way she said his name. Like it belonged to her. From that moment, the darkness around me wasn't just lonely, it was crushing. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. But I was wide awake in the worst nightmare of my life. It kept happening. Marcus started coming more often. Sometimes he'd hold her hand. Sometimes they'd talk in low voices. Sometimes she'd cry again, but not for me. They thought I was just a vegetable in a bed, hooked to machines. But I heard everything. I remember her saying one night, "It's not fair. I didn't ask for this. I didn't think he'd live." She said that while I was still breathing in the bed next to her. That's when something inside me broke. And that's also when I started to fight. To come back. To wake up. Because I needed to look her in the eye. And let her know I remember everything. 6 weeks later, I opened my eyes. The room was blurry. My throat felt like sandpaper. But the first thing I saw was Claire, slumped over in the chair beside me, asleep. When a nurse came in and called her name, she gasped. She looked at me, and I'll never forget it. The way her face shifted from shock to guilt in less than a heartbeat. She gripped my hand. "Jack," she said, her eyes full of tears. "You came back to me." I didn't speak right away. My lips were dry. My chest ached. But I managed to say one word. "Marcus." She froze. Color drained from her face. Her mouth opened slightly. I closed my eyes again, not because I was tired, because I needed her to feel that fear. She didn't know yet that this story, our story, was far from over. When I said his name, Marcus, Claire didn't speak. She blinked a few times, swallowed hard, and gave me a shaky smile. But her hands had gone cold in mine. I felt it. I pretended to be too weak to talk again after that. Truth was, I wanted to see how long she could keep up the lie. I want to know what kind of woman I had married. I was moved out of the ICU 3 days later. My body was healing slowly, ribs still sore, my legs weak, speech slurred at times, but I was awake, aware, and dangerously quiet. Claire stayed by my side the whole time. At least on the surface, she was perfect. She held my hand, fed me soup, rubbed lotion on my arms like she used to when we were first married. She even brought my favorite hoodie from home. To any nurse or doctor, she looked like the ideal wife, grateful, patient, loving. But I knew something they didn't. She was hiding everything behind that soft voice and steady smile. They sent me home in a wheelchair with a therapy plan and a whole stack of prescriptions. Claire set up a room downstairs for me, since I couldn't climb stairs yet. She ordered special meals, got me a comfortable recliner, and even hired a part-time nurse to help. Everyone kept saying, "Claire's a saint, Jack. You're lucky." But at night, when the nurse left, I could feel her distance. She'd sit on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone. She never let me see the screen. She flinched when I asked about work. "I'm just tired," she'd say. "It's been a lot. For both of us." But I've been in a coma for 6 weeks. And I remembered her voice, her tone, her little gasps. Things she'd never said when she thought I couldn't hear. She wasn't tired. She was ashamed. The second week back home, Marcus appeared. I was in the living room, half watching TV, when I heard the front door open. I assumed it was Claire with groceries. Instead, I saw him, tall, clean-cut, confident in that casual way that makes some men instantly likable. He walked in like he belonged there. "Hey, Jack," he said, stepping toward me with a plastic smile. "Heard you gave us a real scare. I'm glad you're back, man." Man, that word hit me harder than any blow. I nodded stiffly. My throat still hurt, so I didn't say much. Just stared. Claire came in right after, carrying a bag of takeout. "Oh," she said too casually. "I bumped into Marcus at the taco place. He wanted to say hi." I nodded again, still silent. Marcus sat down across from me, legs spread, elbows on knees, like this was some social visit. "I don't know if you remember," he said, "but I came by the hospital a few times to check on you." Claire was pretty torn up. I watched his eyes when he said her name. Soft, familiar. And then he looked at her, and I saw it. Regret, pain, longing. She looked away from him too quickly. That's when I knew for sure it hadn't stopped. Later that night, after Marcus left, I asked her gently, "How close did you two get while I was gone?" She dropped her spoon into her bowl. "What?" she whispered. "Marcus," I said, looking her dead in the eyes. "He was around a lot, huh?" She stiffened. "He's just a coworker." He was worried. "Did you love him?" I asked plain and simple. She didn't answer. She got up and walked to the kitchen, and I just sat there, every breath reminding me of the ribs that never healed quite right. That night, I started keeping notes. While she slept, I rolled over and opened a small journal I hid in the nightstand drawer. I wrote down everything I remembered from the coma, his voice, her laughter, the times I sensed them whispering beside me. I added new observations, too, when she was gone for hours, the way she touched me less now, how she no longer looked me in the eyes during long silences. I wasn't writing because I needed proof for anyone else. I needed it for me, because gaslighting doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it's soft, polite, patient. Sometimes it's a woman you've loved for 12 years saying, "You're imagining it, Jack. You must be confused." 3 weeks passed. Claire seemed more and more restless. She'd clean things that didn't need cleaning, bake cookies she wouldn't eat. She was trying to fill the space with noise and motion. Guilt has a sound, you know. It hums beneath a person's skin. And then came the day she slipped. She left her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. She was upstairs in the shower. I was in my chair. It only took 10 seconds. I didn't scroll through everything. I didn't need to. Just one message. "Marcus, I haven't stopped thinking about you. I still feel you beside me in that room." "Claire, don't. I can't do this again. He's here now. He's watching me." He said your name. That was all I needed. Not because it told me something new, but because it confirmed what I already knew. She came down a few minutes later in her robe, towel in her hair. I was sitting right there at the table. The phone was in my hand. Her eyes dropped instantly. I said nothing. I just pushed it across the table, open to the message. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat down, hands in her lap, like a kid waiting for punishment. I didn't know you could hear, she whispered. I heard everything, I said, and we sat in silence, so deep I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. That was the moment I realized something far worse than betrayal. She had already mourned me, and in that mourning, she had let go of us. The thing they never tell you about betrayal is how quiet it is. It's not some big, thunderous event. No dramatic music. No door slamming. No yelling. Just silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. That's what I remember most from the moment Claire and I sat at the table with her phone between us. Just silence. My wife. The woman I had built a life with. The woman who once held my hand and swore we were forever. She didn't defend herself. She didn't cry. She just sat there, like the truth had already taken its toll. After a long pause, she finally spoke. I didn't think you'd come back. I looked at her, not just at her face, but through it. I saw the woman I married, the woman who laughed at my terrible jokes, who snuck fries off my plate, who whispered I love you while half asleep. And then I saw someone else, someone who had kissed another man while I was fighting for my life. I didn't die, Claire, I said, but you acted like I did. Her voice cracked, but her words were steady. You were gone for weeks, Jack. They didn't think you'd wake up. I was alone. I didn't plan for it to happen. Don't give me that, I said, my voice sharper than I meant. You chose him. Again and again. She looked at her lap. I pressed. How long? Her eyes stayed down. How long, Claire? She let out a breath. 3 months before your accident. That hit harder than I expected. 3 months before the coma. So this wasn't about grief, or loneliness, or a moment of weakness in the hospital waiting room. She had already opened the door to Marcus long before life tried to take me away. That night, I wheeled myself into the guest room. Claire didn't stop me. She didn't beg. She just stood in the hallway, hugging herself, silent. I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about how quickly trust can turn to dust. I remembered our wedding day, the way her hands trembled when we exchanged vows, the joy in her eyes. I remembered the first time she told me she was pregnant, how we cried together on the kitchen floor. I remembered when we bought this house, painted these walls, picked out the floors. It was ours, and now it felt like I was trapped in a stranger's home. Over the next few days, Claire moved around the house like a ghost. She tried to talk sometimes, tried to explain. I never stopped loving you, Jack, she said once, standing in the doorway of the guest room. It just got confusing. I was scared. I thought I lost you. I didn't respond, because I remembered something else from a coma. Not just voices or moments, but the feeling. The emptiness. I remembered what it felt like to slip out of the world, to feel your body still, but your soul floating just above it. And I remember the moment that changed, when I heard her whisper Marcus's name, felt her hand pull away from mine. That's what brought me back. Not love, not hope, but suspicion, pain. That was my lifeline. One afternoon, I told her to sit down. I need you to tell me everything, I said. She hesitated. Why? Because I deserve it, I said, eyes locked on hers. If you want even a sliver of peace between us, you tell me everything. She nodded, slowly, and she did. Over the next hour, she walked me through it. The first night it happened. How it started with drinks after work. How Marcus made her laugh in ways I hadn't in months. How it was just one time at first, then another, then more. How they met at hotels. How they even kissed in our driveway once when I was inside watching a game. She cried through it. I didn't. Because when your heart breaks like that, it doesn't burst. It cracks slowly, quietly. The worst part wasn't the sex. It wasn't even the lies. It was the intimacy, the way she talked about his hands, his cologne, the way she said his name like it belonged in her mouth. That's what stayed with me. After she finished, I sat there numb. Then I asked the question I feared most. Do you love him? She closed her eyes. I thought I did, she whispered. But not now. Not anymore. I nodded, then said, that's what you told me once, too, and wheeled out of the room. Claire moved out a week later. She cried when she packed her things. I didn't stop her, not because I didn't love her anymore, but because I loved myself enough to know I couldn't live in a house built on lies. The therapist said forgiveness is a process, that it doesn't mean forgetting or accepting or even staying. It just means letting go of the weight. I'm still working on that. I still hear her sometimes. In the creak of the stairs, the soft hum of a song she used to sing while doing dishes. But I also hear something else now. My own voice. And for the first time in months, it's starting to sound like me again. They say healing isn't a straight path. It's more like walking through a house that once felt like home, now scattered with broken glass. You don't know where to step without cutting yourself. That's what life felt like after Claire moved out. Each room whispered her name. The scent of her shampoo lingered on the pillow she left behind. A single earring sat on the bathroom counter like it was waiting for her to come back. The coffee cup she always used, the one with the little crack on the rim, was still in the drying rack. But she was gone, and I was left with the pieces. My sister, Megan, started coming over more. She was blunt the way big sisters are. "You need to start getting out," she said one morning, pushing open the blinds with force. "Sunlight, movement, life. You can't sit in this cave forever." I half laughed, not sure the outside world is ready for me yet. She put her hands on her hips. "You survived a coma, Jack. You survived Claire. If that's not a reason to show your face to the sun, I don't know what is." She was right. I had survived, but surviving isn't the same as living. Weeks passed, then months. I started physical therapy again, the kind that didn't just treat the body, but tried to wake up parts of the soul. The nurses were kind. One of them, Elena, reminded me of laughter, not because she tried too hard, but because she didn't. She was younger, not flirtatious, just warm. She told me stories about her kids and her garden. She talked about salsa dancing and how much she missed her grandmother's cooking. It was the kind of normalcy I didn't realize I needed. One afternoon, while helping me through stretches, she asked, "You've got a sadness in your eyes. You lost someone." I looked at her and said, "Yes." She didn't press, just nodded. That meant more to me than she knew. Then one day, Claire called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me still needed, I don't know, closure, maybe. Her voice was soft, careful. "Jack, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I thought you should know. Marcus is gone." I didn't understand at first. "He left," she continued. "Moved to Seattle. Said he couldn't handle the guilt. Or me." There was a silence between us. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Relief? Justice? Satisfaction? But I felt nothing. She went on. "I think I expected him to fix what I broke. But all he did was show me how deep the break really went." I said nothing. She added, "I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I threw everything away." More silence. Then finally, she said, "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to hear it from me, not someone else." I thanked her, not for the pain, but for the truth. It was too late to fix us, but maybe not too late for me to fix myself. I started writing again, just small things at first. Thoughts, memories, regrets, then something deeper, a journal. Each page helped me understand what had happened to me, what I had allowed, what I had survived. One entry I wrote said, "She broke my heart, but I let it stay broken too long. Now, I choose to pick up the pieces, even if my hands bleed." That was the first day I felt real. Not whole, but real. One night, I sat on the porch under the stars. The wind carried the faint scent of lilac from the bush Claire had planted 2 summers ago. I should have hated it, but I didn't. Some memories don't rot with time. They just soften. I thought about love, how it changes, how it sometimes ends without warning, and how sometimes surviving love is harder than losing it. But I also thought about the future, about what kind of man I wanted to be, what kind of life I still wanted to live. I looked up at the sky and whispered to myself, "She cheated while I was in a coma, and I remember everything, but I choose now to remember myself more." And with that, I exhaled the past and let the night hold the pieces I no longer needed to carry. The hardest part of any story isn't the betrayal. It's not even the pain. It's deciding what to do after. When the silence settles and the dust stops dancing in the sunlight, you're left with one question. Who are you now? I ask myself that every morning. And for the first time, I began to find answers. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in truth, in survival. In healing, 392 days after I woke up from my coma, I stood. I stood at the edge of Lake Echo. Claire and I used to visit this spot every fall, watching the trees shed their leaves like little acts of courage. Now I stood there alone, but not empty. I had learned that healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about reclaiming what's left, about standing in the ruins and saying, "This is still mine. My life, my breath, my story." Claire and I never got back together. There were no grand reconciliations. No soft piano music playing in the background while we kissed through tears. Instead, there was respect, distance, a kind of mutual understanding. We had loved each other once, but sometimes love isn't enough to unbreak what's already shattered. She stayed in therapy. Last I heard, she was helping at a shelter for abused women. Said it gave her a sense of purpose. I think she was trying to make peace with herself. As for Marcus, I never saw him again. He left town quietly, like a man trying to outrun his own reflection. I used to imagine confronting him, saying something sharp, or maybe just punching him once for good measure. But in the end, I let it go. I figured the worst thing I could do to him was live well. I moved, not far, just enough to start fresh. Smaller place, fewer memories. Elena, the physical therapist, became a friend. Then something more. Slowly, carefully. No fireworks. No whirlwind romance. Just kindness. Just honesty. She never asked me to forget my past. She just made space for my future. We went on slow walks. Laughed at bad movies. Cooked dinner together while dancing barefoot in the kitchen. She kissed the scar on my temple one night and whispered, "This just proves you came back." And I did. Not just from a coma, but from the heartbreak, from a silence, from the edge of giving up. There's something I want you, whoever's reading this, to know. You don't come back from betrayal the same person. You come back quieter, more careful, but also wiser. You learn how strong your heart actually is when it shatters and still beats. You learn who deserves the pieces of you and who never did. Now, when people ask me about that year, when I tell them my wife cheated while I was in a coma, they stare like it's a movie, like it couldn't possibly be real. But it was, and I remember everything. The pain, the rage, the disbelief. But I also remember surviving. And in the end, that's what matters most. Thank you to everyone who stayed with me through this story. If you've made it this far, I hope you find your strength too. If you've been betrayed, remember, what they did is part of your story, but it's not the whole story. You're still here. You're still breathing. And you still deserve love. The end. And remember to turn on notifications and subscribe for more powerful, emotional, and dramatic life stories. Your support helps bring these truths to light. See you in the next one.